Welcome to aminacademy.com. Let us go mini tour on biology and we'll discuss about summary of the subject. Biology is the scientific study of life. It is a natural science with a broad scope but has several unifying themes that tie it together as a single coherent field. For instance, all organisms are made up of cells that process hereditary information encoded in genes, which can be transmitted to future generations. Another major theme is evolution, which explains the unity and diversity of the life. Energy processing is also important to life as it allows organisms to move, grow, and reproduce. Finally, all organisms are able to regulate their own internal environments. Biologists are able to study life at multiple levels of organization, from the molecular biology of a cell to the anatomy and physiology of plants and animals, and evolution of population. Hence, there are multiple subdisciplines within biology, each defined by the nature of their research questions and the tools that they use. Life on Earth, which emerged more than 3.7 billion years ago, is immensely diverse. The earliest of roots of science, which included medicines, can be traced at ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia in around 3000 to 1200 BCE. In 1842, Charles Darwin penned his first sketch of one on the origin of species. Serious evolutionary thinking originated with the works of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who presented a coherent theory of evolution. The British naturalist Charles Darwin, combining the biogeographical approach of Humboldt and uniformitarian geology of Lyell, Malthus, writing on population growth, and his own morphological expertise and extensive natural observations, forged a more successful evolutionary theory based on natural selection. Similar reasoning and evidence led Alfred Russel Wallace to independently reach the same conclusion. The basis for modern genetics began with the work of Gregor Mendel in 1865. This outlined the principles of biological inheritance. However, the significance of his work was not realized until the early 20th century, when evolution became a unified theory as the modern synthesis reconciled Darwinian evolution with classical genetics. In the 1940s and early 1950s, a series of experiments by Alfred Hershey and Martha Chase pointed to DNA as the component of chromosomes that held the trait-carrying units that had become known as genes. A focus on new kinds of model organisms such as viruses and bacteria, along with the discovery of the double helical structure of DNA by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953, marked the transition to the era of molecular genetics. From the 1950s onward, biology has been vastly extended in the molecular domain. The genetic code was cracked by Har Gobind Khorana, Robert W. Hawley, and Marshall Warren Nirenberg after DNA was understood to contain condoms. The Human Genome Project was launched in 1990 to map the human genome. Atoms and molecules. All organisms are made up of chemical elements. Oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen account for most 96% of the mass of all organisms. with calcium, phosphorus, sulfur, sodium, chlorine and magnesium constituting essential all the remainder. Different elements can combine to form compounds such as water, which is fundamental to the life. Life arose from the Earth's first ocean, which formed some 3.8 billion years ago. Since then, water constitutes to be a most abundant molecule in every organism. Water is important to life because it is an effective solvent, capable of dissolving solids such as sodium and chloride, ions or other small molecules to form an aqueous solution. Once dissolved in water, these solids are more likely to come in contact with one another and therefore kept part in chemical reaction that sustain life. Organic compounds are molecules that contain carbon bonded to another elements such as hydrogen, with the exemption of water. Nearly all the molecules that make up each organism contain carbon. Carbon can form covalent bond with up to 4 other atoms, enabling it to form diverse, large and complex molecules. For example, a single carbon atom can form 4 single covalent bonds such as methane, 2 double covalent bonds such as carbon dioxide, triple covalent bonds such as in carbon monoxide. The simplest form of an organic molecule is the hydrocarbon, which is a large family of organic compounds that are composed of hydrogen atoms bonded to a chain of carbon atoms. Macromolecules, the primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary structure of hemoglobin protein. Macromolecules are large molecules made up of smaller subunits or monomers. Monomers include sugars, amino acids and nucleotides. Carbohydrates include monomers and polymers of sugar. Lipids are the only class of macromolecules that are not made up of polymers. They include steroids, phospholipids and fats, largely nonpolar and hydrophobic water-repelling substances. Proteins are the most diverse of the macromolecules. They include enzymes, transport proteins, large signaling molecules, antibodies and structural proteins. The basic units for monomer of a protein is an amino acid. 20 amino acids are used in proteins. Nucleic acids are polymers of nucleotides. Their function is to store, transmit and express hereditary information. Next, about cells. Cell theory states that cells are the fundamental units of life, that all living things are composed of one or more cells, and that all cells arise from pre-existing cells through cell division. Most cells are very small, within diameters ranging from 1 to 100 micrometers, and are therefore only visible under a light or electron microscope. There are generally 2 types of cells: eukaryotic cells, which contains a nucleus, and prokaryotic cells which do not. Prokaryotes are single-celled organisms such as bacteria, whereas eukaryotes can be single-celled or multicellular. In multicellular organisms, every cell in the organism's body is derived ultimately from the single cell in fertilized egg. About cell structure. Structure of an animal cell depicting various organelles. Every cell is enclosed within a cell membrane that separates its cytoplasm from extracellular space. A cell membrane consists of a lipid bilayer including cholesterols that sit between phospholipids to maintain their fluidity. At various temperatures, cell membranes are semi-permeable, allowing small molecules such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water to pass through while restricting the movement of larger molecules and charged particles such as ions. Cell membranes also contain membrane proteins, include integral membrane proteins that go across the membrane serving as membrane transporters, and peripheral proteins that loosely attach to the outer side of the cell membrane, acting as enzymes shaping the cell. Cell membranes are involved in various cellular processes such as cell adhesion, storing electrical energy, and cell signaling, and serve as the attachment surface for several extracellular structures such as cell wall, glycokinetics, and cytoskeleton. Structure of plant cell. Within the cytoplasm of cell, there are many biomolecules such as protein and nucleic acids. Metabolism. Example of an enzyme catalyzed exothermic reaction is metabolism. All cells require energy to sustain cellular process. Metabolism is the set of chemical reaction in an organism. The three main purposes of metabolism are the conversion of food to energy to run cellular process, the conversion of food or fuel to monomer building blocks, and the elimination of metabolic waste. These enzyme catalyzed reactions allow organisms to grow and reproduce, maintain their structures, and respond to their environments. Metabolic reaction may be categorized as catabolic, the breaking down of compounds, for example, the breaking down of glucose to pyruvate by cellular respiration, or anabolic, the building up synthesis of compounds such as proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acid. Cellular respiration. Respiration in a eukaryotic cell. Cellular respiration is a set of metabolic reaction and processes that takes place in cell to convert chemical energy from nutrients into adenosine triphosphate, that is ATP, and then release waste products. The reaction involved in respiration are catabolic reactions which break large molecules into smaller ones, releasing energy. Sugar in the form of glucose is the main nutrient used by animal and plant cell in respiration. Cellular respiration involving oxygen is called aerobic respiration. Photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other organisms to convert light energy into chemical energy that can later be released to fuel the organism's metabolic activities via cellular respiration. This chemical energy is stored in carbohydrate molecules such as sugars, which are synthesized from carbon dioxide and water. In most cases, oxygen is released as a waste product. Most plants, algae, and cyanobacteria performs photosynthesis, which is largely responsible for producing and maintaining the oxygen content. Cell signaling. Communication is the ability to cells to receive, process, and transmit signals with its environment and with itself. There are generally four types of chemical signals: autocrine, paracrine, juxtacrine, and hormones. In autocrine signaling, the ligand affects the same cell that releases it. Tumor cells, for example, can reproduce uncontrollably because they release signals that initiate their own self-division. Cell cycle. The cell cycle is a series of events that takes place in a cell that cause it to divide into two daughter cells. These events include the duplication of its DNA and some of its organelles and the subsequent partitioning of its cytoplasm into two daughter cells in a process called cell division. Inheritance. Genetics is the scientific study of inheritance. Mendelian inheritance, especially, is the process by which genes and traits are passed on from parents to offspring. It has several principles. Genes and DNA. A gene is a unit of heredity that corresponds to a region of deoxyribonucleic acids, that is DNA, that carries genetic information that controls from form or function of an organism. DNA is composed of two polynucleotide chains that coil around each other to form a double helix. It is found as linear chromosomes in eukaryotes and circular chromosomes in prokaryotes. Cell expression. Gene expression is the molecular process by which a genotype encoded in DNA gives rise to an observable phenotype in the proteins of an organism's body. This process is summarized by the general dogma of molecular biology. Gene regulation. The regulation of gene expression by environmental factors and during different stages of development can occur at each step of process, such as transcription, RNA splicing, translation, and post-translational modification of protein. Genes, development and revolution. Development is the process by which the multicellular organism, plant or animal, goes through a series of changes starting from a single cell and taking on various forms that are characteristics of life cycle. There are four key processes that underline development, that is determination, differentiation, morphogenesis and growth. Determination sets the development fate of a cell, which becomes more restrictive during development. Differentiation is the process by which specialized cells from less specialized cells such as stem cells. Stem cells are undifferential or partially differentiated cells that can differentiate into various types of cells and proliferate indefinitely to produce more of the same stem cells. Evolution. Natural selection for darker traits. Evolution is a central organizing concept in biology. It is a change in heritable characteristics of population over successive generations. In artificial selection, animals were selectively bred for specific traits. Given that traits are inherited, populations contain a varied mix of traits, and reproduction is able to increase any population. Speciation. A species is a group of organisms that mate with one another, and speciation is the process by which one lineage split into two lineages as a result of having evolved independently from each other. Phylogeny. Phylogeny is an evolutionary history of specific group of organisms or their genes. It can be represented using phylogenetic tree, a diagram showing lines of descent among organisms or their genes. History of life. History of life on Earth traces how organisms have evolved from the earliest emergence of life to present day. Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and all life on Earth, both living and extinct, descended from a lost universal common ancestor that lived about 3.5 billion years ago. Geologists have developed a geologic timescale that divides the history of the Earth into major divisions. Bacteria and archaea. Bacteria, Gematomonas aurantiaca, that is 1 micrometer. Bacteria are type of cell that constitute a large domain of prokaryotic microorganisms, typically a few micrometers in length. Bacteria have a number of shapes, ranging from spheres to rods and spirals. Bacteria were among the first life forms to appear on Earth and are present in most of its habitats. Bacteria inhabit soil, water, acidic hot springs, radioactive waste, and the deep biosphere of Earth's crust. Bacteria also live in symbiotic and parasitic relationship with plants and animals. Most bacteria have not been characterized, and only about 27% of the bacterial phyla have species that can be grown in the laboratory. Archaea constitute the other domain of prokaryotic cells and were initially classified as bacteria. Eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are hypothesized to have split from archaea, which was followed by their endosymbiosis. Viruses are submicroscopic infectious agents that replicate inside the cells of organisms. Viruses affect all types of life forms from animals and plants to microorganisms, including bacteria and archaea. More than 6,000 viruses species have been described in detail. Viruses are found in almost every ecosystem on Earth and are the most numerous type of biological entity. The origin of viruses in the evolutionary history of life are unclear. Some may have evolved from plasmids, pieces of DNA, and that can move between cells, while others may be evolved from bacteria. In evolution, viruses are an important means of horizontal gene transfer, which increases genetic diversity in a way of analogous to sexual reproduction. Because viruses possesses some but not all characteristics of life, they have been described as organisms at the edge of life and as self-replicators. Ecology. Ecology is the study of the distribution and abundance of life. the the interaction between organisms and their environment, ecosystem. The community of living, that is biotic organisms in conjunctions with a non-living abiotic components, example water, light, radiations, temperature, humidity, atmosphere, acidity and soil of their environment is called an ecosystem. These biotic and abiotic components are linked together through nutrient cycle and energy flows. Energy from the sun enters the system through photosynthesis and is incorporated into plant tissue by feeding on plant and on one another. Animals move matter and energy through the system. They also influence the quantity of plant and microbial biomass present. By breaking down dead organic matter, decomposers release carbon back to the atmosphere and facilitate nutrient cycle by converting nutrients stored in dead biomass back to a form that can be readily used by plants and other microbes. Population is the group of organisms and the same species that occupies an area and reproduce from generation to generation. Population size can be estimated by multiplying population density by the area or volume. The carrying capacity of an environment is the maximum population size of a species that can be sustained by that specific environment, given the food, habitat, water, and other resources that are available. The carrying capacity of a population can be affected by changing environmental conditions such as changes in the availability resources and the cost of maintaining them. In human populations, new technologies such as the Green Revolution have helped increase the Earth's carrying capacity for humans over time, which has stymied and attempted predictions of impending populations decline, the most famous of which was by Thomas Malthus in 18th century. Next, community. A community is a group of population of species occupying the same geographical area at the same time. Heterotrophs that consume plants are primary consumers or herbivores, whereas heterotrophs that consume herbivores are secondary consumers or carnivores, and those that eat secondary consumers are tertiary consumers, and so on. Omnivorous heterotrophs are able to consume at multiple levels. Finally, there are decomposers that feed on the waste products or dead bodies of organisms. Next, biosphere. Fast carbon cycle showing the movement of carbon between land, atmosphere and ocean in billion tons per year. Yellow numbers are numeral fluxes, red are human contributions, white are stored carbon. Effects of the slow carbon cycle such as volcanic and tectonic activity are not included. A biochemical cycle is a pathway by which specific elements of matter are turned over moved through the biosphere and the abiotic, that is lithosphere, atmosphere and hydrosphere compartment of Earth. There are geochemical cycles for nitrogen, carbon and water. Conservation. Conservation biology is the study of the conservation of Earth's biodiversity with the aim of protecting species, their habitats and ecosystems from excessive rates of extinction, and the erosion of biotic interactions. Thanks for Wikipedia. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.